There you go. You can push it to Melon.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Johnson. I am the International Director of Social Action. I'd like to welcome everyone to another Living Well Brother Speaker Series. This is being hosted by our International Mental Health Committee, as Brandon Brown, or Brother Brown, just mentioned. The purpose of this webinar, and this is our second year doing it, is to talk about not just seasonal affective disorder, but also just have a candid conversation around the holidays. And we call it the holidays because we understand that people have a tough time. COVID is still alive and well. People may have experienced trauma and loss of loved ones around the holidays, and it kind of, in my opinion, brings up some of that, those issues that I would like to think that we can have a courageous conversation around. And so I have the distinct pleasure of not only listening in, but also learning about, one, what seasonal affective disorder is, but also how to manage stress, anxiety around the holiday season. And I'm sure that you're going to be in a lot of formative data and also discussion around that. So for me, I thought that it was very telling that it was over 3 million people that deal with this per year. So that's a lot, in my opinion. And so I'm looking to learn more about it and ways that we can effectively deal and manage with this type of disorder. So I'll turn it back over to you, Brother Brown. Thank you again and your committee for the good work that you guys do, and also bringing these kind of programs to the communities that we serve.
Thank you. And I don't want to fill this room with platitude, but it's actually under your leadership or allowance that you created a space within the fraternity that you've uplifted the mental health conversation, so that it's just as important as St. Jude's and all of the other things that we do under social action. So with that, can we go to the next slide, please? So we have just a couple of objectives for today, just so that we can make sure. And one is just to have a greater awareness of the impact of the events during this season. Right. So when we talk about holidays, we recognize, or we have to be honest, that for some individuals, the holidays is not a pleasant time. Right. And we will sit and sort of unpack that and sit with that. The next thing is that we're going to present you with some clinical terms. We're going to talk about impact. Now, this isn't a therapy session. You'll hear me say that in a second, but sometimes it's very empowering to have the word that expresses how you feel. Right. I'm pretty sure many of us have been like, we try to search for a word. And then once we get that word, we feel very empowered. And actually, in some cases, we feel relieved. Right. And then I think the other thing that we have to understand is that through friendship, fellowship, community, and familyship, these are some of the ways that you can, that this can be addressed. Right. Next slide, please. So with regard to the Mental Health Committee, as I had shared before, the Mental Health Committee is a new committee. We are actually in our second year, and we gave ourselves some priorities. One is the promotion of monthly mental health observations. So we try our best to sort of identify the things that are important to communities of color, and we wish to educate them. The other thing is what we're doing right now. We're having courageous conversations. And I think oftentimes people will say that, we're trying to have a safe conversation. In truth, we can't make you feel safe. Safe is a very subjective thing. We recognize that. But in that, we would just simply ask that whatever you need to do in this conversation, if you need to walk around, if you need to sip some water or sip some coffee or soda, whatever you need to do to help you stay regulated, that's very important. And then something that we are very happy that we have just started is we have been identifying mental health champions within Phi Beta Sigma. The purpose of the mental health champion is it's someone who is lifting up the mental health conversation just as a part of their walk, just as a part of their journey. And we just announced a couple weeks ago our first mental health champion, that being Brother Charles Harper Sr. Out of the state of Texas. Next slide, please. So before I get to a couple slides, just some acknowledgments. Let's just set the stage for this evening. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay not being okay. Like, I think oftentimes it's when you talk about just sort of the fundamentals of emotional intelligence, being able to say what you are feeling at that time can also be a very empowering and fulfilling experience. As I have said before, this is not a counseling or therapy session, but we will say that this can be a heavy conversation, and that we hope that in your own way, that you find a safe resource to help you unpack some of the things that might be discussed tonight, or might come up for you in the form of a memory. All right, next slide, please. So in every space, you need to have a big wish. And one of the big wishes of the Mental Health Committee is to actually have a mental health professional system, right? We have a directory where we have our brothers of Phi Beta Sigma, as well as our sorors of Zeta Phi Beta, ready and willing and able to help others that are in some type of distress. This is not yet up and running. This is our big goal. We will keep working it because we wish to make it happen. Next slide, please. So I have the honor, privilege, and distinction of introducing our presenters. We have Brother James Jefferson. Brother Jefferson, can we get 2 sentences about you? Don't worry about it. Then we got Brother Tatum. Brother Tatum, can we get 2 sentences about you?
Yes, Brother Brown, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Brother Travis Tatum. I'm from the Pi Phi Sigma chapter of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, and I currently work as a QMH PA in the state of Virginia. So I'm a qualified mental health professional, just here to help you guys understand the meaning of seasonal affective disorder this evening.
Thank you so much. And Brother Walston, a couple sentences.
Yes, good evening. Brother Barry from Mu Iota Sigma, where I serve as the recording secretary, work for the New York State Department of Health, social worker by profession, and I'm here to have a conversation about what this could look like from the lens of a Black male.
Okay. And let's see if we have Brother Jefferson. Brother Jefferson, are you with us? That is that is okay. So before we begin, I think oftentimes what we need to understand is just sort of this understanding that the holidays might
Brother
be.
Brown,
Yes.
1 second. I'm going to unmute him. There you go. Now you can talk, Brother Jefferson.
Watch, he's still going to say that he can't talk.
Yeah, we can't hear him.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right.
So I think one of the beautiful things, or not, it's not even beautiful, but I think one of the things that we have to remember is that not everything is for everybody, right? And I think what we need to understand, whereas we might have some people that the holidays are just this beautiful, festive experience, with beautiful memories and family traditions and all of that. But in truth, there are other people out there that struggle with the holidays, right? And this slide here that everybody, I'm pretty sure, has read a couple times is just sort of an indication of what other people might go through when we talk about the holiday seasons and holiday seasons. It doesn't necessarily have to be just this season, but just holidays in general. So having said that, Brother Jefferson, if you're there, Brother Tatum, Brother Walston, floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I think it will present a challenge for Brother James, but hopefully he'll fix that out since he is managing the slides. Um, but you
With
can
his
go to
laughter, with his
the through his
laughter, I don't know.
laughter is good. Well, he is part of this discussion and the PowerPoint. So brothers, again, thank you. And I see in the chat, you know, Brother Brown had asked us to put, Brother Melwine had asked everyone just to indicate where you're coming from. And I see that we have people from Texas, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, South Carolina. That's awesome. I see some familiar faces, appreciate your support. So when we think about holidays, one of the things we want to do for icebreaker, if you can put in the chat, what would be your superpower? If you had a superpower, what would it be? Just put it in the chat, and I'll tell you mine is really to have telepathy. Like I need to know what's going on in the minds of people, and to be able to make some better kind of choices, perhaps, kind of knowing, you know, what people are thinking. But that's my superpower. Okay, teleporting. That's a good thing too. And all of this is relative when we think about, again, our discussion around holidays. All right, I like teleporting. We won't spend too much time, but somebody, okay, Brother Melwan wants to fly. Okay, awesome. Travel the multiverse. So that's good. I think, you know, psychokinesis. Okay, wow. So thank you all for, you know, sharing and educating us about what that looks like, right? Because I think, you know, this icebreaker for me is a jump off and perhaps something that we can refer back to, right? As we think about this discussion of holidays. And welcome again, brothers. Can we have the next slide? So again, you know, when we think about holidays, and we did this last year, and of course, this is, you know, we've all been impacted by COVID, and, you know, it happens differently in every state. New York State was the epicenter. And so, you know, that impact, you know, for communities of color, but for New Yorkers was really serious, right? Because we actually became the model for other states in regards to how we respond to it. And it went into the definitely seasons and the holidays when it first started. And part of that, you know, was huge, right? So not only did we try to think about what that looks like and how we're responding to COVID and the pandemic, and also how we just continue to have our lived experience. Like, how do we celebrate birthdays? How do we engage in holidays? It was very, very heavy. And it did require us to really pivot and reset, reboot. I can say for myself, as a person, you know, who's thinks about holidays, that I've had to really think differently about the relationships with these particular holidays that are coming up, right? And also the relationship with my family. And what does that mean? You know, how do I spend time with my family? How do I also manage what's going on with me? Which part of the pandemic and COVID created stress, tension, depression, guilt, anxiety, all those things were part of that, on top of our normal kind of lived experience in losing people, right? So of course, pandemic happened, COVID happened, the one and the same, but we also lost loved ones to other types of things. And so that just compounded this experience that we had. And very often as we, you know, as I think about what it could have done or what it did, because I was working in building community around the pandemic, I didn't have the luxury of kind of isolating myself because I am a public health worker and I was a first responder. And so when I think about isolation, I can tell you that there were family members that clearly we all were impacted about social distancing and what that looked like. However, when I wasn't able to see family members, I had to really think about other ways of dealing with that. As a first responder, I was out there creating and building opportunities for better responses to this pandemic. But isolation was real. Like I had to really sit with that, and it was very difficult. I had to again reframe what the dialogue was going to be with family, not so much with coworkers. And I think again, in my experience, very often as a Black male, because we're not always the one who's out there, developing relationships and calling all the time. I'm just the opposite. I do call a lot. But, as a Black male, I was thinking about, well, I'm already feeling isolated in the world, feeling like I'm not connected. And this pandemic definitely compounded things. So some of the pitfalls that, you see on the screen, yes, there were financial hardships. There were people being impacted by all the things that's related to finances, credit cards, paying bills. But then as we moved again into these celebratory things, how do we manage that? And I can tell you that, of course, media often plays a huge part in how we think about the relationship. And that's where the holidays comes in, because it could put you in a daze. And so, when we kind of keep hearing the messaging about what you need to do with this holiday and how you need to move with this holiday, some of us, it impacts very heavily because we're meeting some expectations of what media has out there. But those are the things that brought up for me. Could you go to the next slide, Brother Jefferson?
Hold on one sec.
Yes.
Real quick. James, I'll take it over.
Oh, I got it now, Brandon. We're good.
Seriously?
I hear you, but you are on mute on our end. We see you on mute, but we can hear you.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Okay, that's
good.
awesome. Awesome.
But,
thank you. Yes. So as we transition again, I kind of talked about what the holiday, Christmas, Kwanzaa, and talk about Kwanzaa, but again, just holidays in general. The word that we are actually, playing off of is the holidays, and kind of what that can do if we buy into the commercialism of holidays, if we're not conscious about our own lived experience and how we have been managing it in the past. And then on top of all those things that's happening in the world, right? And in our community. And I didn't even talk about, the impact of homicide among Black males. Very often here in New York State and here in Albany, I've seen just significant impact around the holidays of not only the loss of community members, but specifically Black males. So what does that do for me as I think about my own lived experience on top of the holiday? And it does put you in a very different space. It does create fear, anxiety. And there are some ways that you have to deal with it. One is acknowledge it. So I just wanted to, as we lift up, again, thinking about holidays and what that could mean for us as we go forward. And I think, Brother Jefferson, you may be next, if you bring next slide. And so there are some terms, of course, that Brother Jefferson is going to talk to you about that, again, evokes some of these experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Walston. First off, I'd like to first greet everybody. So my name is James Jefferson. I'm a licensed independent social worker, clinical practice, also advanced alcohol and drug counselor, also a QMHPA in the state of Virginia. So really a little bit about me is I'm a therapist right now, working with adults, children, doing psychotherapy, also education as well, like psychiatric hospitals. So what we have here is just a little bit of terminology that we have regarding depression. We got these out of the DSM-5. I won't go too deep into them, but really first thing we have is major depression. Really what major depression is just over the course of 2 weeks, often we use this screening tool called a PHQ-9, which is called a patient health questionnaire number 9. So a lot of times you guys go to your doctor and they ask you those questions like, have you been feeling down, depressed, or hopeless over the last 14 days? Had any trouble eating, thoughts about suicide, feeling like a failure, those type of things. We're screening for depression, right? And so depression really just occurs over the course of 2 weeks, right? And it's really just you feeling down, maybe not eating, overeating, really low mood, right? Then we have what we call persistent depressive disorder, which is also known as dysthymia. All right, dysthymia is just like depression, except for it happens over the course of 2 years. So usually with people with dysthymia, they're the people who are really like a flat affect, really depressed all the time, right? And it's really, really low. And that's just their norm, okay? And then we also have bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is what they also call, manic depression. So often people think of bipolar as, someone's hot and cold, right? But that's not necessarily what bipolar is. Bipolar is when you have someone who has what we call mania, which is like an elevated mood, someone who's always angry, irritated, right? And it happens over the course of like 3 or 4 days. So sometimes mania look like someone maybe not sleeping a lot, maybe sleeping 2-3 hours, feeling very productive. Really don't need a lot of sleep. They have a lot of those business ideas. They'll probably open up a whole bunch of accounts, maybe withdraw a lot of money, do impulsive spending, right? Over the course of 3 or 4 days. But then on top of that, well, what happens after that is that they have the low mood, right? So that depression that we talked about, may happen for another 3 or 4 days or for a week or so, where they're just kind of down, maybe not getting out of the bed, crying spells, and that's just kind of how they go up and down. So it's like the highs and the lows over the course of some time, right? That's the manic depression. Then of course we have the seasonal affective disorder, which Brother Tatum will get to a little bit more, but that's also known as the seasonal depression. And then we have adjustment disorder with depressed mood. Adjustment disorder often happens after something occurs. So it's usually a stressor or some type of situation. So maybe, financial stress, hearing about the death of a loved one that was going on, school, work, right? These things are stressing you out, right? And so you're unable to adjust to what's going on, and that's causing you to have a low mood, right? So usually after maybe about 6 months, if that doesn't get better, then it might become something like depression or dysthymia, or we might have to look into some other diagnosis, right? And then we have prolonged grief disorder, which is a new disorder. That's commonly known as bereavement, but it's over a long period of time. So though we never really get over death, there's a certain way that we learn to adjust after the loss of someone. So with prolonged grief disorder, it's really saying that maybe you never learn to adjust. So when you find those people who are still maybe very upset over a loved one, maybe a mother died about 5-10 years ago, and every time they think about them, they're just kind of breaking down crying like they just passed away, right? That's that prolonged grief disorder, okay? And then last but not least, we have the peripartum or postpartum depression, which happens, after a woman gives birth. Typically what that looks like is she has trouble bonding with the child, low affect, really no excitement and joy, when you have that newborn. We definitely have to screen for that, just at risk of the child and the mother as well. We don't want anything to happen to them. But sometimes if you are able to notice that women who have a child, maybe they're just not excited about that child, or they're really not able to connect to it, or feel any type of sense of, duty to that child, it could be that postpartum depression. Thank you.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about seasonal affective disorder. As you see on the screen, it's defined as seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, as a type of depression in which people experience feelings of sadness, low energy, especially around winter months, when the days are shortest. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Many people go through short periods of time where they feel sad or not like their usual selves. Sometimes these mood changes begin and end when the seasons change. People may start to feel down when the days get shorter in the fall, winter, also called the winter blues. Sometimes you might hear people say, I got the winter blues. And begins to feel better in the spring with longer daylight hours. In some cases, these mood changes are more serious and can affect how a person feels, thinks, and handles their daily activities. If you have noticed significant changes in your mood and behavior whenever the seasons change, you may be suffering from seasonal affective disorder or SAD. This is a type of depression. In most cases, SAD symptoms start in the late fall or early winter of the year and go away during the spring and summer months of the year. This is known as winter pattern seasonal affective disorder. Then we're going to talk about some of the symptoms that come along with seasonal affective disorder. It's not considered a separate disorder, but it's a type of depression. It's characterized by its recurrent seasonal patterns with symptoms lasting about 4 to 5 months per year. Therefore, the signs and symptoms of seasonal affective disorder include those associated with major depression and some specific symptoms that differ for the winter pattern or summer pattern months. Not every person with seasonal affective disorder will experience all the symptoms that we'll talk about, but there you will begin to see a lot of the symptoms show up. And some of those symptoms are feeling depressed most of the day, nearly every day, losing interest in activities that you once enjoyed doing, experiencing changes in your appetite or your weight, fluctuation in weight and appetite, having problems with sleep, feeling sluggish or aggravated, having low energy, feeling hopeless or worthless during this time of the season, having difficulty concentrating, having frequent thoughts of death or suicide. Some of the symptoms that are more centralized to the winter pattern seasonal affective disorder are oversleeping, so hypersomnia. You're sleeping too much every day during those months. Maybe overeating, particular type of craving during those type of months, or when you're having those feelings. Weight gain, or social withdrawal, hibernating, isolating yourself from others. Some of the symptoms that we see that are specific to the summer pattern seasonal affective disorder are like trouble sleeping, once again, insomnia, poor appetite, leading to weight loss in the summer months, restlessness or agitation, and extreme anxiety, or some of the other symptoms that come along with seasonal affective disorder. That's all. Some of the coping skills that we can use to cope with seasonal affective disorder is light therapy or psychotherapy, like Brother James was talking about before. He engages in psychotherapy with some of his individuals or clients. So that's very helpful. Antidepressant medications. So there are medications that will be able to treat the seasonal affective disorder, just like we said, it's a type of depression. So it can be treated with antidepressant medications, and also getting vitamin D, getting lots of sunshine, getting out and being social. A lot of times when you get out of your house, it causes you to be social with others. And so some of that being social and getting out in the sun will help alleviate some of the symptoms that come along with seasonal affective disorder.
So either Brother Jefferson or Brother Tatum, could you explain just a little bit more about light therapy?
I'll let Brother James handle that. Pretty sure he
Yeah,
has
absolutely,
a bit
brothers.
more practice with that.
So yeah, really, light therapy is just like it sounds. You know, when we think about seasonal depression, you know, one of the issues is that it gets dark early. You know, and it kind of goes in with the vitamin D and things like that. You know, all those things are really related. But really, you know, from my understanding, my learning and stuff like that, you know, just as something as simple as, you know, keeping the lights on and stuff like that, or getting outside and getting more sunlight. You know, right, just having that bit of brightness, right, because it's dark, right, and that darkness kind of feeds into our depression. So if you think about someone who's going through like seasonal depression, you know, probably dark outside, they're probably inside dark, you know, because it's cold, probably bundled up somewhere, you know, sitting down, just like watching TV or something like that, right? That kind of just feeds into it, right? But that light therapy, you know, just allowing yourself to get outside, or, you know, maybe like the night lights, stuff like that you have on, like the
Hold on one
lamps and
second.
things like that inside, right? It's something that can just really be helpful and can kind of also change your mood, right? So that's really what light therapy is, just like it sounds.
Okay, and then there's a question in the chat about thermotherapy. Could that serve as an antidepressant as well?
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't heard of thermal therapy, but from what it sounds like, maybe something about just kind of keeping warm. Is that what it is, or maybe like some heat or
That's
something like
something a
that?
thermometer. Yeah.
Is that what that is? Because if so, I guess really with the antidepressant, you know, it's just something to help you combat the depression, right? Antidepressants only does so much, you know. Okay, so heat therapy, right? So I'm not sure if that would necessarily act as an antidepressant, but I mean, I'm sure it would be something that could be helpful, you know, when you have the seasons changing and stuff like that, and you know, maybe just getting outside, getting that sunlight, as well as maybe having that heat could kind of do good for the body. But again, I'm no expert on thermal therapy. What I can do, I can get some research and then come back to you. Maybe ask some of my providers about it, and then next time we can go further into it. But I would imagine, you know, just being able to do something more warm would probably be more supportive than, you know, just kind of being cold, bundled up on a couch somewhere, sitting in the dark, though.
And then there's a comment in the chat that there are lights out there that mimic sunlight as it relates to the light therapy.
Yes, brother Davenport, the LPC from Virginia. How you doing, brother? Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different tools out there that we can utilize. You know, honestly, Amazon has so much stuff. You know, Google, just about anything that you can, anything that you really think of, there's probably something out there. So, you know, if you guys have any type of therapist or, you know, any type of physicians out there, and you want to learn about some more tools and things like that, I encourage you guys to consult with them, because I mean, there's something out there, you know, that we can utilize to really promote, you know, this light therapy, or to just maybe get us in better mood. There's so many different tools. There's no one way to do it.
Great. I thought Brother Melwan had a question or a comment, but anyway, Brother Melwan, did you?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, great. So, you know, so we've talked about kind of, again, those terms, a specific diagnosis, and some of the practical things when we think about holidays, right? If you're not with a practitioner, if you don't have a therapist, if you don't have the means to actually pay for medication, or you know, get the treatment that you need, right? There are some practical ways that we can think about how we go into this season, this holidays. And as Brother Jefferson just talked about, really a practical way to, even with light therapy, is to think about your environment, right? Think about opening the shades, think about, but part of that is the mental thing, that we have to go and manage. We have to manage that and thinking about it differently. So positive reflection, part of the, again, as we move into holidays, we know it's always going to be here, the 25th, and we know the 26th is the Kwanzaa celebration. So really thinking about planning what it is that you need to do and how you want to interact with those holidays. And I can say personally that I celebrate Kwanzaa. And so when I think about expenses, like I don't have to really go deep into the pocket, because it really is about that relationship for me is about creating something that's practical for a family member or a friend. And so based on, or depending on what you are celebrating, planning is important. And then all of us are working kind of, how much time do you need to spend with your loved ones? Some of us have those really nice jobs where we can spend a week and take a week off, or 2 weeks, or a couple of days, but how do we maximize the time so that it's not impacting you negatively, right? You're not rushing. And that really is important. One of the other things that's important to me is be aware of expectations. And so again, as I've indicated, I celebrate Kwanzaa. And so there's not an expectation that on the 25th, Brother Jefferson is going to get 15 gifts from me. Typically, he's going to wait until after when I celebrate, and on our first day of Kwanzaa, to receive a Zawadi gift. And so it needs to be personal. You need to think about, again, that relationship. And of course, create time for fun and activities. And again, it's supposed to be a festive holidays. A holiday should be festive, should be celebratory. However, given all that we said before us, the reality is that there are things happening in our life. And so we're not intentional about that relationship with the holiday. It can become a holidays. Next slide. And we can have feedback too as well.
If I could just put something out there, right? So
Yes,
this is for Brother Jefferson Tatum or you, Barry. So oftentimes when we talk about these disorders, right? Sometimes people, I think, interpret it as they know that they are in it, right? But for some people, like they may have been in this space and they do not know, right? So how would you respond, or what would you say to individuals, either with regard to hope, or what would you say to individuals about just being able to perhaps recognize the signs within themselves that they might need some help? I mean, we did talk about signs, but I think that sometimes people, like, if they're in it, how can they see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can jump in on that real quick, Brother Brown. First, I just want to say, it's important to understand, one, the difference between signs and symptoms, right? A sign is something that's external, right? The sign is something that we can all see, right? So even when we think about looking at our loved ones or our peers and friends, right? Some of these things we'll be able to see, right? That low affect that they have, maybe them not eating, them not sleeping, right? Maybe, the isolation and stuff like that, right? Be really mindful of that. That's the point of us kind of bringing the education to everybody, right? And the symptom is the thing that's internal, right? We can't tell if you feel sad or if you are feeling depressed, right? We can't tell if you're feeling suicidal, right? Those kind of things, right? Those are the things to be aware of. So, just understand the difference between a sign and a symptom. But I think also what's really important, one, is that, these things that we talk about, these diagnoses, right? We don't want to label anybody, right? A lot of times people take these labels and they put them on themselves. Some people pity it. Some people use it for malingering and things like that, right? That's not the point of these diagnoses we have, right? It's merely a conceptualization that we utilize to help other people understand what we can do to try to treat you and to better you, right? But honestly, the biggest thing that you really have to do is to be able to have reflection, some introspection, right? And to be honest with yourself, right? A lot of times during this time, during the holidays, we try to put on the facade and things like that, for our family. We feel like we got to be strong and stuff, and we really might not feel the best, and we tell ourselves that we do, and we really don't, right? So just being mindful of these things that we don't feel the same, right? Recognizing that we're not doing the things that we usually do, right? That anhedonia, the abolition, the lack of motivation and things like that, right? Those are really important, right? Instead of just saying we just got to push through, to understand, right? It's okay to not be okay. That is one of the first steps to us being able to even get the assistance that we need, or be able to recognize what's going on, right? So just a lot of introspection, understanding, reflection. And when someone tells you maybe that, hey, you don't look the greatest today, or you look like, you've been isolating for a while, or you seem a little sad, right? So sometimes listen, right? To not necessarily become so defensive or be in denial and be ready to push away, right? Because you feel like they're trying to label you, but to be able to allow yourself to be vulnerable and to accept help is really big as well.
Okay. Brother Tatum, brother Walston, anything?
Well, I think someone
Brother
just,
Davenport, I appreciate your comment in the chat.
yes.
Barry, if you wanted to lift it up.
Yeah, I just, Brother Davenport, as you, think about a baseline, that too is subjective, and I definitely appreciate, kind of understanding what that looks like. Personally, what my godfather lost his partner, and they've been together for 45 years during this time. And so when I think about signs, to what Brother Brandon was asking, I know that this is a time where there is that loss, right? And so some of the things that I look for him is to think about how much isolation he may be experiencing, or not returning phone calls, or even messages, because I'm texting all the time, that I know if it's not a routine message, right, to Brother Davenport's comment, the baseline would be that they always respond, and there are certain words that would trigger. So I think we all have for those who are trying to support our loved ones, our family and friends around this experience, if they've had a loss, that being conscious of the environment, listening very carefully, making sure that there's some consistency with the words and their relationship with you. And for me, again, it's all about the relationship and understanding what that looks like and how it's set in this space. So there's these are just a few resources. Brother Jefferson, Brother Tatum, definitely, and Brother Brandon. We as a committee are available to you as a resource. However, these are just a couple of resources as you think about responding to holidays and thinking about the relationship with the holidays and how you can have a successful and celebratory one, and one that you can manage, right? So one, I don't want to leave with everybody thinking that everything is happy, because everything is not good and happy. However, we do want everyone's life to be managed in a very healthy way. And again, even as we think about it's okay to be not to be okay, it's understanding that we want you to make every attempt to have what you need to move through the day, move through your life, and to have a good experience with yourself. Are there other resources, Brother Jefferson or Brother Tatum, that you want to lift?
Honestly, Brother Walston, I think, those are really good resources. Of course, just consulting, with mental health professionals as well. Like I said, just being mindful is really important. But also, I just want to go ahead and emphasize something as well that we kind of spoke about earlier regarding, like the seasonal affective disorder. Please, guys, just be mindful of our family members and things like that. We talked about how seasonal affective disorder kind of surrounds itself around, like the daylight, things like that. But also, with the holidays, a lot of times we think about the grief, all right? The loved ones that we lost, grandma who used to always make a big dinner, or the spouses and things like that who used to come over and have gifts and stuff like that, right? A lot of times we get down over that. So I just encourage you guys to kind of be mindful of those, especially if you have any family members who might have lost someone within the last year or so, who are really big on holidays, right? Just check on them. Suicide can happen at any moment. Be able to recognize the signs of someone who may or may not, even the people that you think may not do it, just check on them, especially if they're isolated and things like that. We just want to make sure that everybody's safe. And so I just encourage you guys to do that, especially if someone was recently lost, or someone had a loved one that they recently lost before the holidays, because it's gonna be a really tough time.
And team, if I could put this out to you, I think sometimes, and we mentioned it a little earlier, you can do reflection of your family tradition, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes people don't want to hug, right? So you know, there may be individuals that are in a family tradition setting where hugging is just sort of the expectation, but hugging for them is a part of the problem, right? So there is always ways to sort of remain part of the family, but oftentimes we have to look and be honest with certain things and say, like, you know what, I'm just not comfortable with this, right? So you know how we say that it's okay not to be okay. I'm just giving another concrete example. It's okay if you don't want to give a hug, give a hug. And when people look at you like, oh, you got to hug auntie. Yeah, you know what? No, I don't. I'm okay with that. Auntie, I love you. I just don't feel like hugging right now.
And also, brothers, I'd like to bring up the new resource of 988, the number we can dial, or if anyone is having, thoughts of suicide or in this crisis lifeline. So that's another resource we can add is calling the number 988, national number.
Barry?
That's pretty much what it's exactly what it is. Again, to your point, reflection of whatever you celebrate, however you celebrate, it's that relationship with that particular holiday. And it's okay for you to define it. And so I suggest that Brother Brown is stating that we can define what that relationship looks like in order for us to avoid holidays, D-A-Z-E. So brothers, it would be great to hear some feedback from you, but thank you, Brother Brandon. I think that's the last slide. Thank you, brothers Jefferson and Brother Tatum.
This is the last slide. So I am just curious. You have been with us now for about 47 minutes. We will be ending shortly. And what we have always done in the past, and we will offer today, is even though the event might end in a couple minutes, we stay in this space for as long as individuals wish to have conversations, right? So at this time, I'm simply going to ask, does anybody have any questions? You can either come off mute or you can put it in the chat. So to Brother Walston, to Brother Jefferson, oh, I was about to say you did such a good job. Nobody has questions.
Such a beautiful thing.
Oh, Jefferson, get out of the chat.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
So I feel that oftentimes when you do such a good job, it really addresses at least the basics. And I think that this was around awareness, around engagement, around perception, around tradition, things of those natures.
Brother
So with
Brother Davenport came on.
Okay,
I do
Davenport.
have a question, and just going into talk. If Brother Jefferson can talk a little bit about how just adding an extra coping skill in there, or how aromatherapy actually helps in reference to the senses and what that looks like. And I'm adding that in. I'm asking that question because it's one of the things I add in, but I wanted to, you talk about it.
Brother Davenport, you gonna sit here and pull up on me with all this alphabet soup behind your name and tell me to talk about aromatherapy?
I am a participant tonight.
Well, look, I'm gonna be honest with you, Brother Davenport. So really with me, I'm more of the traditional type of, therapist. So, of course, the aromas and things like that, the nostalgia and stuff is really important. But for me to say, like, if I really dove deep into it, I can't say I have. However, as a participant, I'm saying, if you want to share some of your knowledge, help me learn, that would be really great. So, I mean, I definitely give you the floor, if you can just share that with the brothers.
Okay, I don't mind doing that. And just for a little bit of background, Brother Dana Davenport, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I'm a member of Iota Sigma chapter. I'm a licensed professional counselor and all the other alphabets behind my name with that. I'm currently, I own a private practice, but I'm also the university counselor at Virginia State University. So talk about aromatherapy is one of the things I like to do. And I mentioned, when you mentioned light therapy, it also came to aromatherapy. Can we talk about the senses as well? I try to do things that basically create an atmosphere that creates warmth and it creates acceptance and makes you when you walk in, it triggers good memories. Well, I try to anyway. So, with students who say my office smells like a coffee shop, coffee shops are usually associated with, good things. So and because I like that, but also with aromatherapy, we look at those things that naturally actually induce serotonin levels, increase serotonin levels, and increase those basically things in the brain that pretty much that boost our mood. So we start talking about, I like peppermint oils, or I like eucalyptus, because those are natural stress relievers, but they also pretty much, they smell good, and they bring down your cortisol levels in there and boost your mood, which decreases depression, as far as there. And then so when we talk about those things there, it just something to add into the toolkit when we're talking about, seasonal affective disorder, but also depression as well, because we're talking about levels in the brain and that are off, and we're talking about how we boost our mood to increase those levels that pretty much put us in a place where we're back to baseline, where we're feeling okay, we can go through and manage. And the other part, when you mentioned, just adding this part in, vitamin D levels, I think most of us don't really understand how important that really is. So if vitamin D levels are lower, and in women, iron levels, it can bring your mood down. So, it's just things to go out there. It's those things where, it takes work to go out there and be you sometimes, but that work is important in order for you to go out there and be you for somebody else. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Brother Davenport. I mean, for me, I think this takes us back to one of our original conversations with the mental health committee around self-care. So usually I ask the question of people like, Brother Davenport, you got a phone?
I'm sorry.
You have a phone? You have a cell phone?
Yes, I do.
What kind of cell phone you got?
I have an iPhone.
All right, so let me ask you a question. You're about to walk out the door and the phone's on 5%. What do you do? Well, first of all, how do you feel?
I feel as though I have failed as a person, because
Okay.
I never have gotten there. Yes.
So, time notwithstanding, I find it very interesting that we spend a lot of time charging our phones, but we walk around on 5% all day, right? So when you talk about the aromatherapy, when you talk about thermal therapy, like it's really about just sort of what are those things that you can do that literally give yourself a little bit of grace, credit, and merit during the day, so that you're able to sort of sustain and maintain yourself. So I appreciate your comments. Brother Bugs, Mr. Bugs, you have a question?
Good evening, gentlemen. First, I want to say wonderful, excellent job in the presentation. It was very informative. I enjoyed it. I had more of a comment than a question, and it was to your point, Brother Brown. That was one of the things that I thought was very important to share on top of everything else, especially during this time of year, is self-care. And what that looks like. A lot of times what happens is when we're feeling down, depressed, and we're grieving, some of the times we forget to take care of ourselves, making sure we're eating properly, making sure we're getting plenty of rest, making sure that we're getting some type of physical activities, go to a gym, go for a walk. If there's hobbies that you have, whether it's reading, listening to music, or writing, or doing a journal, these are things that we don't want to neglect during this period of time of the season. Setting boundaries, which is another important self-care aspect of it. Don't feel obligated, to go to a family dinner or gathering or a party if you're not in that space to do so. It's okay to say no, or not at this time, but maybe in the future, I will attend. So a lot of these little things that we sometimes neglect and forget, I think is really important to help us get through these holidays, as has been mentioned. That's all I had to say.
So, Brother Bugs, what I'm hearing you, and thank you for you, what I'm hearing you saying is that self-care isn't a checklist, it's a lifestyle.
Absolutely, brother. It's a lifestyle, whether we're feeling down or not. We should all be reassessing ourselves, Even when we're feeling burnt out at work, a lot of times it's because we neglect ourselves and we put everything else as a priority, you know, to make sure that everybody else is good, and we forget to make sure that we're good first so that we can be good to others. So definitely making sure that we're a priority, and making sure that we're in a good space so that we can enjoy the holidays and just enjoy life in general. Also make sure you're staying connected to whatever spiritual beliefs you have, you know, whether that's meditating or if you have a specific organized religion that you practice, make sure that you're staying connected to those things that give you strength, give you hope, and give you a sense of peace during these times where it's very stressful and it can be overwhelming.
So Brother Bugs, I appreciate your for your share. We are actually on the hour. It is 9 o'clock. What I would like to do now is I would like to lift up our international director, Brother Malwan Johnson, for any closing thoughts or words.
Thank you, Brother Brown. I think this was a very engaging conversation. Thank you, Brother Tatum, Brother Jefferson, Brother Walston for the second.
Now, you might want to, Malwan,
Can you hear me now?
we can hear you now, sir.
Oh yeah, sorry. Computer problem. But what I was just saying was I appreciate everybody for joining the second annual Bringing in the Holidays. I think this is a very important topic. You know, with the disorders that they were talking about, the depression, the anxiety, everybody's doing something. Key thing what Brother Jefferson was saying is that it's okay to not be okay. And I think I say that all the time. And so providing these safe spaces that we are doing with our International Mental Health Committee, I applaud everybody's work on the committee, and for everybody who is that is joined in today. Stay tuned because in 2023 we continue to bring more programs like this to the masses. Hopefully we get the same kind of attendance because you know we find that these aren't very popular webinars when it comes to attendance, but we still do them anyway because we know that they're important. And so we will continue to offer the recordings of all those. If you in case you missed them, you can follow on the Phi Beta Sigma YouTube page, and you will see these webinars being posted there. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brother Brown, and tell everybody and just say everybody have a good night and thank you for joining.
Actually, you just did my job. Will the PowerPoint be made available?
I could, yeah. If you send it to me, I could post it too.
All right, we'll make sure that you get it.
Okay.
So on behalf of the International Committee, you know, on behalf of the International Director of Social Action, again, my name is Brandon Brown, and I thank everybody for joining us. We will remain in this space for as long as people want to have conversation. If not, we ask that you avoid the holidays.
Thank you, good brothers.
I just want you to know